They tried to tear my daughter down for being a genius. Now, she's the face of change in our school district. Hi, I'm Andre, 41, and I used to think raising a math prodigy was my biggest challenge until her own teacher tried to erase her brilliance one accusation at a time. It started with the phone call. Not a celebratory one. Not the kind where you hear, "Congratulations, your daughter is amazing." No, this was fury. Mrs. Holloway, Zara's AP calculus teacher, practically screamed, "Your daughter got another A." It was a scandal. At first, I thought she misspoke. "Isn't that good news?" I said. "No black student has ever scored this high in my 23 years of teaching," she hissed. "She must be getting help." My stomach twisted. I was speechless, standing in my kitchen with the phone to my ear, while this woman went on about how Zara finishes tests too quickly, how she doesn't ask questions like normal students do. According to her, that meant she was cheating. I almost laughed. Zara had been devouring calculus textbooks since she was 10. She once corrected a math problem on the back of a cereal box. But instead of praise, all this woman could see was a black girl doing something she didn't believe was possible. Mrs. Holloway separated her from the rest of the class, had her take tests with no calculator, watched her like a hawk. When she still got perfect scores, she called again, angrier. She must have memorized the test. She changed the test version. Another A+. And that's when she said she'd recommend Zara be removed from AP calculus for academic dishonesty she couldn't prove. Because other students were complaining they couldn't score as high, so Zara must be cheating. Or I must be helping her cheat. I asked. "So it's either she's cheating, or you're giving her special treatment?" She replied, "Exactly." That was the moment I stopped playing nice. I started attending school board meetings. At first, just to listen, then to document, then to speak. Because what started as one angry teacher calling my daughter a cheater turned into something bigger, an entire system that had let her do this before. I contacted other parents. Destiny Williams, accused of plagiarism, removed from pre-calc. Jordan Davis, isolated during tests so many times he developed anxiety. Malik Turner, transferred schools entirely. Same phrases. Finishes too fast. Doesn't ask questions. No black student has ever. I sat across from those parents at a coffee shop with a stack of printouts. We compared voicemails, emails. The patterns weren't just similar. They were identical. I brought all of it to the principal, Mr. Yates. His response? "Mrs. Holloway is our most experienced math teacher. If she has concerns, they're valid." I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Her only concern is that my daughter is black and better at calculus than your entire teaching staff expects." His face went tight. "That's a serious accusation. So is accusing my daughter of cheating with no proof." We didn't wait for the school to act. Zara registered for the International Math Olympiad state qualifier, proctored by external evaluators. Cameras. No room for accusations. When Mrs. Holloway found out, she called me again. "She can't take that test." "Why not?" "It'll hurt her confidence. If she fails, then she fails." But she won't. Zara took the test. Scored in the top 5 in the entire state. The only student from our school to qualify for nationals. And that's when Mrs. Holloway did the most unhinged pivot I've ever seen. A local paper wrote a feature about Zara. They interviewed her teacher, and Mrs. Holloway painted herself as the inspirational mentor who always saw her potential. She told the reporter, "Some teachers might have doubted her, but I never did. I just pushed her harder because I knew she was gifted." I almost choked on my coffee reading that. Suddenly, parents were requesting her class. The district superintendent called to congratulate her. So I forwarded every voicemail, every email, every smug, sneering accusation she'd made over the past year. Within an hour, the superintendent's assistant called to schedule a meeting. That night, I printed everything paper thick enough to slow a fan. At the meeting, Dr. Pearson's face changed as he read through it. Page after page. His eyes stopped moving, then narrowed. He said, "Would you be willing to speak to our compliance officer? This falls under discrimination protocol." Gladly. Her name was Diane Hoot. She scheduled a formal interview. 2 hours. Every detail. She listened carefully, took notes, asked about Destiny, Jordan, and Malik. Then she started calling people. Destiny's mom called me that night, crying, because someone was finally listening. 3 white parents even came forward, saying their own kids noticed how Mrs. Holloway treated black students. Within a week, Mrs. Holloway was placed on paid leave. A substitute took over. Zara came home and said, "Class feels different, lighter." She didn't know about the investigation yet. I hadn't told her. I wasn't sure what would happen, but I knew this. For the first time in months, my daughter wasn't being treated like a criminal for being brilliant. The day Zara found out about the investigation, she didn't scream or cry. She just sat very still at the dinner table, holding her fork in midair. "Wait, Mrs. Holloway's not coming back?" I nodded. "She's on leave. The district's looking into everything." Zara set her fork down. "So they finally believe me?" I wanted to say yes, with my whole chest. But I'd seen too many investigations go nowhere. So I told her the truth. "They're listening, and they're taking it seriously." She nodded slowly. "That's more than anyone else ever did." In the meantime, Diane kept working. She called me again to follow up. Someone had sent her an anonymous email. A former colleague of Mrs. Holloway. They didn't want to go public, but they confirmed she had a pattern of targeting black students. They described the same language, the same accusations, the same disbelief. Anytime a student of color outperformed expectations, Diane expanded the investigation. She started interviewing students directly, and the stories started piling up. She always acted surprised when I did well. She made jokes about genetic math skills. She told me I must have gotten help if I finished the test early. One girl said Mrs. Holloway refused to write her a college recommendation because she wasn't ready for that kind of pressure. It was a tsunami of pattern recognition. 3 weeks in, Mrs. Holloway sat for her interview. According to the compliance report I saw later, she claimed she was just maintaining standards, treated everyone the same, except she didn't. While Zara was competing at Math Olympiad Nationals, the school board reviewed the preliminary findings. Marina, Destiny's mom, Reed, Jordan's dad, and I all spoke during public comment, 3 minutes each, but it was enough. Reed said, "My son had panic attacks every time he walked into that classroom." Marina said, "My daughter stopped believing she was smart." I said, "My daughter scored in the top 5 in the state, and still came home crying because her teacher made her feel like a fraud." Afterward, the board president said the patterns were deeply concerning and would require a measured but serious response. But Mrs. Holloway, she wasn't going down quiet. Her lawyer sent a letter, claimed she was being targeted, that the investigation was biased, that her teaching style was protected by academic freedom. The district's legal team reviewed everything and came to a different conclusion. The evidence of discriminatory behavior was substantial and credible. They couldn't fire her outright. Tenure and union contracts protected her, but they could strip her power. Mandatory bias training, formal reprimand in her file, removal from all advanced classes, 2 years of probation with monthly observations. Her Teacher of the Year nomination pulled, but that didn't fix everything. Zara started waking up at a.m., sweating, convinced she'd forgotten something. She stopped volunteering answers in class, stopped trusting herself. One night she said, "What if I'm only good at math because I tried so hard to prove her wrong?" That crushed me. My daughter, who used to scribble equations on napkins at dinner, now second-guessing every right answer. So I found her a therapist, a black woman, brilliant and gentle, who specialized in racial trauma in academic settings. They met once a week. It helped. Slowly, Zara started to separate Mrs. Holloway's failure from her own identity. She still had scars, but she wasn't carrying them alone anymore. And when the AP scores came in, a perfect 5.0 tricks. No cheating. Just a girl who loved math and finally got the chance to prove it without someone breathing doubt down her neck. The day the official report dropped, I read it like scripture. Diane's findings were methodical dates, incidents, patterns, witness statements. Line by line, she mapped the quiet rot that had festered in that classroom for years. She concluded that Mrs. Holloway demonstrated consistent discriminatory practices based on race, and recommended formal discipline, loss of AP responsibilities, and documentation in her permanent record. Dr. Pearson, The superintendent met with me again privately. He apologized personally. I should have acted sooner, he said. We all should have, I believed him. Not because of the apology itself, but because of what came next. The district implemented new policies. Every academic dishonesty claim now required written documentation and evidence. All teachers were required to undergo annual bias training. Students and families got a clear, confidential process to report discrimination outside of just going to the principal. They even created a data review committee to audit racial disparities in class placements, suspensions, referrals. I was invited to join as a parent. Rep. Zara never knew how many nights I sat awake at the kitchen table helping write those proposals, but she felt the results. Destiny Ray enrolled in advanced math her senior year. She told Zara she felt safe enough to try again. Jordan didn't come back. He'd found his peace in literature. But he wrote Zara a letter thanking her for speaking up. You made it harder for them to ignore us, he wrote. Malik's family stayed quiet, but his mom sent me a message saying he decided to major in computer science. He's thriving now, she said. Thank you for fighting when we couldn't, Mrs. Holloway. She got reassigned to teach geometry at another school, far away from any AP course, stripped of her pedestal. And when new complaints came in because they were investigated immediately. Her time protected by tenure was over. And Zara? She enrolled in a university-level summer math program for gifted high schoolers. First day, she walked into that campus glowing. When I picked her up, she practically floated into the car. They treated me like I belonged, she said. She wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. She was just doing what she loved. And for the first time in a year, I saw my daughter laugh like a kid again. August came, and with it, the launch of the district's new bias training. Every teacher had to complete it before the new school year, no exceptions. And while they didn't name names, the case studies in the modules looked painfully familiar. Same phrasing, same patterns, different districts, different decades, but all the same story. I hoped the staff connected the dots. I got a call from Marina one afternoon. Destiny had just finished her back-to-school schedule. She's in AP Stats and AP Physics, Marina said, voice trembling with pride. And she's not scared anymore. We sat in silence for a second. Not because there was nothing to say, but because some victories are too hard-earned to put into words. Meanwhile, Zara's senior year was about to start. She had a new AP Calculus teacher, Mr. Williams. First day of class, he called her by name, welcomed her, and said he was excited to see what she'd bring to the table. No suspicion. No tests taken in isolation. No comments about how surprising her scores were. Just respect. Still, Zara struggled some days. She'd flinch when teachers hovered too long near her desk. She triple-checked her answers, not because she didn't know them, but because she feared being accused again. Therapy helped. But healing wasn't linear. Some days, she'd come home glowing. Other days, she'd quietly ask, do you really think I'm this good at math? Or did I just fight harder? I always told her the truth. She was brilliant before the fight. The fight just made sure the world couldn't ignore it. September brought a bombshell. The district's first official equity report. It showed that Black and Latino students had been placed in advanced classes at significantly lower rates, even when they had identical grades and test scores as white and Asian peers. The disparities were undeniable. The report recommended sweeping changes, new criteria for placement, multiple measures of ability, and regular audits. I was asked to join the Equity Advisory Committee. I said yes without hesitation. This work wasn't over. Not even close. But for the first time, people with power were finally listening to the ones they'd ignored for years. And my daughter? She had stopped shrinking herself to fit someone else's limited idea of gifted. She was taking up space, boldly, brilliantly. And this time, no one could erase her. By October, something happened that made me stop in the middle of the hallway at home and just stare at Zara. She was laughing. Deep, belly-shaking laughter. The kind I hadn't heard in almost a year. She and two other black girls from her AP Calc class had formed a study group. Not because they were struggling, but because they weren't. And they wanted to challenge each other, push themselves, compete. But in that sharp, joyful way gifted kids do when they find their tribe. Zara came home one afternoon and said, Dad, There are 12 black students in AP Calculus this year. 12. The previous year? 3. The year before that? 2. Parents who'd kept their kids in regular classes were trying again. Some told me directly it was because Mrs. Holloway was gone, because they finally trusted the system enough to risk putting their children back into those rooms. It felt like something shifted. Not everything, but something. Then came the thick envelope in the mail. Zara's top choice university. She opened it at the kitchen table. Her hands were shaking, her eyes already glistening. Full acceptance. Full scholarship. A personal letter citing her math Olympiad performance and her admissions essay about resilience, racism, and reclaiming her voice. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I did it. You earned it, I said, pulling her into a hug. That letter went straight into a frame, not because we needed more decor, but because we needed a reminder of truth, of proof, of how far she'd come. The district recognized Zara at the next board meeting. Certificate, photo for the website, all smiles. After the cameras clicked, 3 board members approached me quietly. They apologized not just for what happened to Zara, but for not listening sooner. One admitted, "We'd heard rumors for years. We just didn't act." I didn't say, "Told you so," I said. Acting late is still better than not acting at all. That spring, Destiny got into the State Honors College. Jordan found his passion in literature and landed a creative writing scholarship. Malik was thriving in computer science at his new school. Even the data was catching up. Academic dishonesty referrals leveled across racial groups for the first time in years. Why? Because now teachers needed actual evidence, not gut feelings. The system wasn't perfect, but now it remembered. And it protected Mrs. Holloway. She resigned at the end of the year, cited personal reasons, but everyone knew it was accountability, not burnout. She didn't transfer, didn't teach elsewhere. She was done. Zara called it incomplete justice. I called it a start. Summer brought heatwaves and graduation banners, and with them, something I never expected: hope. Not just the quiet kind you hold on to, but the loud, visible kind that hangs in the air like celebration. Zara was named valedictorian. She wrote her speech over 2 weeks, obsessing over every word. She didn't want to be petty, but she also refused to pretend. I asked once, "Are you going to mention Mrs. Holloway?" She paused. "Not by name, but everyone will know." Her final draft was razor sharp. She spoke about perseverance. When people assume you don't belong. About pushing through gatekeepers disguised as mentors. About refusing to shrink under the weight of someone else's bias. When she stepped up to that Mick in her cap and gown, standing on the same stage where she'd once been accused of cheating, she stood taller than I'd ever seen her. She didn't flinch, didn't falter. When she said, "Your doubt was never my limitation, it was your own," the whole crowd went still, then erupted. Afterward, her classmates swarmed her. Teachers, too. Her new calculus teacher told her she'd changed how he thought about giftedness. The chair of the math department apologized for not recognizing the pattern sooner. "We should have protected you better," he said. Even more healing came after the ceremony. Destiny walked across the stage wearing honor cords. Jordan grinned from ear to ear and waved at his cheering family. I looked at Marina and Reed, and we just nodded. We did this. Our kids did this. But Zara wasn't done. That summer before college, she took a job as a teaching assistant for a math enrichment program for middle school students of color. 6 weeks of solving problems, mentoring kids, and telling them out loud that they were smart enough, capable enough, deserving enough. One night, she said, "I want to be the voice I needed when I was 16, and she was. She came home every day buzzing with stories. One kid solved a proof with a totally unexpected method. Another drew graphs all over the whiteboard, grinning the whole time. A shy girl finally raised her hand and got the answer exactly right. Zara said, "They don't flinch when I call on them, because I never assume they can't." Meanwhile, our work on the Equity Advisory Committee continued. We reviewed reports, drafted new policy, proposed a change to how students are placed into advanced classes using multiple measures instead of relying solely on teacher recommendations. The board approved it unanimously. It wouldn't help Zara, she was on her way out, but it would help every kid coming after her, And then, just 6 days before move-in day, a letter arrived from her AP Calc teacher, handwritten, 2 pages. He thanked her for her leadership, for helping other students understand complex concepts, for lifting the entire class with her presence. You made the class better, he wrote, not because you were perfect, but because you were generous with your brilliance. Zara folded the letter and slid it into her college folder, right next to her acceptance. Move-in day came fast. 3 flights of stairs, 2 parents hauling boxes, 1 nervous but excited girl stepping into her next chapter. Her roommate was also a math major. Within 10 minutes, they were arguing excitedly about integral shortcuts and proof styles. I stood in the doorway for a second longer than I should have, just watching, holding it all in. Then I turned to leave. 3 days later, she texted me, just finished my first college calculus class. My professor treats everyone like they belong, like we're all capable mathematicians. Then she added, learning was supposed to feel like this. And I knew it was finally where she was always meant to be. Fall settled in like a deep breath, and with it, a kind of peace I didn't realize we'd been holding out for. Zara flourished, not just academically, but fully. She joined the university's Women in STEM Society, tutored younger students, took an advanced abstract algebra course for fun, but more than that, she exhaled. There were no watchful eyes doubting her. No need to finish tests while wondering if she'd be dragged into the hallway afterward. No accusations. Just curiosity, growth, joy. We FACETIMED every Sunday. She'd tell me about proofs she loved, professors who pushed her thinking, friends who debated the beauty of prime numbers over coffee. One evening, she said, Dad, I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. I just exist now. And that feels like the biggest win. And it was. But the ripples didn't stop with us. The district's new placement policy? It led to a 40% increase in Black and Latino student enrollment in advanced math classes that year. For the first time, schools started tracking data on who got accused of academic dishonesty and requiring evidence before any accusations moved forward. The advisory committee expanded. More parents joined. More teachers, too. There were real, hard conversations. But they were happening. One night, I got a message from a teacher I didn't know. I saw what you did for Zara, she wrote. I didn't say anything when I saw Holloway treat kids unfairly. I'm saying something now. That felt like justice. Even if it was late. Zara came home for winter break wearing a hoodie from her university, smiling wider than I'd seen since childhood. We walked past the framed acceptance letter on the living room wall, and she laughed. You still kept that up? Of course, I said. That letter is proof. She looked at it a moment longer, then said softly, it's not the proof I needed anymore. She didn't need validation now. She knew. Mrs. Holloway tried to define her by suspicion, tried to shrink her, shadow her, erase her confidence in plain sight. But Zara redefined herself. With brilliance, with resistance, with community, with truth. This wasn't just a story about one teacher. It was about every child who gets told they're too something to be exceptional, too quiet, too confident, too fast, too Black. Zara proved them wrong, and she did it on her terms. She was never the exception, she was always the evidence.